Hello students, welcome to Notebook. While talking about world politics, you must have stumbled upon terms like national security and international security. Political debates often reach a stalemate on arriving upon the word national security, making it appear all the more threatening and shadowy. However, as citizens of a democracy, we should have considerable knowledge about India's security concerns. We should also be aware of issues that threaten international security, keeping in mind the contexts and situations they arise out of. Let us now begin. Fundamentally, security means freedom from threatening circumstances. However, not every threat to individual human existence constitutes a threat to national security. Scholars agree that only elements threatening our core values should be relevant to discussions on security. However, it is not clear what constitutes these core values. Governments possibly have a different set of core values than those of the common people. In addition to this, what should be the magnitude of these threats to be considered intense? Notwithstanding the minor threats that surround everyday human existence, security relates primarily to the extremely dangerous threats. These threats could irreparably destroy our core values if we did nothing to protect ourselves or deal with the situation. It is also important to remember that the concept of security has evolved over time, as it has across societies. Security can be broadly classified into two categories: traditional and non-traditional. The traditional concept of security asserts that the greatest danger to a country comes from military threats or actions of another country. These external actions could threaten a country's core values of sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. Military action also often leads to civilian casualty. The government of a nation usually has three ways to respond to military threat. It can either surrender, strategize, or negotiate to prevent the other side from attacking, or actually go to war. Though governments may choose to surrender when actually faced with war, they will never advertise it as the country's policy. Thus, a security policy which entails preventing war is called deterrence, while a policy with the aim of limiting or ending war is called defense. Another element of traditional security policy is the balance of power. Governments are very aware of and sensitive to the balance of power, which rests between their countries and their neighbors, as well as countries with a history of conflicts or differences. Although technological and economic powers are important, an important component of maintaining the balance of power is to build up one's military authority. Another important aspect of traditional security policy is alliance building. An alliance is a political conglomeration of states that cooperate and coordinate to fend off or deter threatening military action. Alliances are usually based on national interests and formalized by treaties. However, they may change from time to time. Thus, the notions of traditional security views external military aggression beyond the nation's borders as the primary source of threat to security. In the international arena of world politics, there is no central authority which regulates the actions of all other governments. The United Nations may be viewed as such an international institution capable of regulating global action. However, in practice, its organizational structure disallows absolute authority. Thus, it is advisable that each country should be responsible for its own security. Traditional security also concerns itself with internal security. However, since the end of the Second World War, most developed countries were more or less assured of internal security. Thus, these countries primarily concerned themselves with threats beyond the borders. During the Cold War period, the United States-led Western Alliance viewed the USSR as a potential external threat and vice versa. In addition, the European colonies of the French in Vietnam and the British in Kenya also faced upheaval due to the demand for independence. As the colonies were freed, they too got embroiled in the Cold War alliances. It is said that the Cold War between the US and the USSR is responsible for nearly 1/3 of all wars post Second World War. The battleground would usually, however, be third world countries. It is also important to note that the security challenges faced by newly independent Asian and African countries are different from those faced by European countries. Newly independent countries not only have to worry about external military violence, but also internal military conflict, civil wars, and separatist movements. It is reported that internal conflicts now make up more than 95% of armed global conflicts. From 1946 to 1991, the number of civil wars has reached an unprecedented high. Thus, both internal and external threats constitute a challenge to security. Traditional security acknowledges that cooperation can limit violence. It is also universally recognized that countries should engage in war only in self-defense or to prevent a mass genocide. Armies are also expected to avoid injuring or hurting civilians and unarmed or surrendering combatants. Other forms of cooperation involve disarmament, arms control, and confidence building. The Biological Weapons of Convention of 1972 and the Chemical Weapons of Convention of 1992 prohibited the production and possession of certain weapons. However, nuclear weapons of mass destruction were not renounced, and thus arms control is practiced. Arms control monitors the acquisition and development of weapons. The Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty of 1972 limited the use of ballistic missiles by the US and the USSR. The Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty 2 or SALT II, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty START, are two of the many treaties signed by the two superpowers to regulate their arms. The Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT) of 1968 regulated the acquisition of nuclear weapons and limited the number of countries which could possess them. Traditional security also deals with confidence building to avoid violence. It is a process aimed at ensuring that fighting nations don't go to war due to misconception or miscommunication. Thus, traditional notions of security engage military action, or at the very least, the threat of it. Paradoxically enough, force acts as the principal threat to security, as well as the principal method of achieving security. With that, we come to the end of this video lesson. In the second part of this lesson, we will discuss non-traditional notions of security, new sources of threats, and India's security strategy. Till then, Team Notebook bids you a warm goodbye. See you soon.